Mosque should be allowed to be built near ground zero. That's what we asked on our web poll on myfoxdc.com. Look at these results here. 18% said yes, 82% said no. However, I went out tonight and found there's definitely a disconnect between what people will say online and those who are willing to talk face to face.
I think they should put it up because I think it speaks volumes about what America is about, which is freedom to practice the religion you want.
It's a non-issue for me. They should let them, build it. It's a matter of, separation of church and state. It does not affect everyday life as a whole. So I would agree with, with just let them build it out there, regardless of whatever happens.
Let's bring in our panel here. Faiz Shakir, editor-in-chief of the Progress Report. Carrie Pickett, editorial page online producer for the Washington Times. Carrie, I'm going to start with you. What am I missing here? Not one person willing to speak against the mosque at ground zero.
Well, you have to remember here, President Obama pretty much did the same thing in his own way. During that Ramadan dinner at the White House, he told a group of Muslims that he was for the building of the mosque and that people had the right to build this mosque over at ground zero. Yet when he's thousands of miles away in Florida and he's asked about the wisdom of building that mosque, he ends up sort of backpedaling and saying he doesn't want to answer the question. He runs away.
What about the disconnect that you saw our poll and then you saw the people I'm talking to on the streets? I searched. I was out there 45 minutes, almost an hour. Couldn't find anybody.
Well, once again, this is a very toxic issue here that's come up. It's been turned into, well, if you're not for building this mosque, then you're apparently a bigot, when in fact, back in 2005, there was a secular institution that actually wanted to be built over on ground zero, and it turned out that this institution was going to be a museum that was going to be a Blame America First structure. And in fact, New Yorkers and Americans rejected that. And it had nothing to do with building a mosque. It had to do with blaming Americans.
Faiz, I want to bring you in here. You're a former DNC staffer. You understand the politics here. This appears to be a Republican narrative. And is it hurting the cause for Democrats when somebody like Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid steps in and says they should build this thing somewhere else?
Yeah, I think it is hurtful to the cause. I wish that there were more politicians who were willing to speak with courage. Initially, I think on Friday night, that's what President Obama did, willing to both defend the Constitution and explain why we need to support the mosque at ground zero, because the basic explanation is you can't paint all Muslims with the broad brush and say that they're all responsible for 9/11.
You can't blame the victims here either for having such emotion, can you?
Of course there's emotions, but that's what the role of leaders is, that you have to explain to them why we stand for these values, why they need to be defended, and that's what I would have hoped Harry Reid would do. I think that that's what President Obama has in his heart, but I think he needs to clarify that that is his view. And I think the more that courageous politicians are willing to take a stand on this, people want to hear that message and they want to gravitate to it, but they're not going to gravitate to it if you sound squishy and weak on it.
Carrie, the Republican narrative here isn't the real narrative, which I have yet to hear somebody articulate, that there's this fear that this Muslim group is sort of sticking their thumb in the eye of the victims and the victims' families.
Well, you have to remember, the imam who is behind this particular mosque, he still hasn't revealed where this funding is coming from for this $100 million mosque. He ended up disappearing into the Middle East. We don't know whether or not he's going to be raising money out there. And more importantly, why is it that the taxpayer happens to be paying for this particular trip out there? And people really want to know more questions, want to know more transparency issues happening around this.
Is that a legitimate argument?
Well, I think when you start from the basis that you're opposed to this mosque, you're going to find all kinds of reasons to oppose it. I think if you look at this gentleman who's out there in the Middle East, he's a goodwill ambassador on behalf of the State Department, which he has done for both the Bush administrations and the Obama administrations, trying to explain how Americans are accepting of Islam. Of course, that's a hard task right now, looking at the picture here in America, but he's actually trying to build relationships. If you look at his project there in New York, what he's trying to do is bring people of all faiths together. He's got an intercultural center. Also, there's swimming pools, there's places for them to congregate, an arts center. This is an effort to try to build American civic life within the Muslim community.
Karen, let me ask you this question. Republicans just got a lot of heat over voting against this bill to give 911 responders billions of dollars in aid. Suddenly, it's almost like the table's been switched now, and they're seizing on this issue to sort of get away from all the negative press that came with that, while still maintaining the 9/11, carrying the flag here.
Well, you have to remember here, that particular bill could have been passed by Democrats, but because of procedural tricks over in the House the Democrats wanted to pull, they wanted to get a supermajority instead. So let's not forget that particular detail. But if there was some real reaching out to, say, 9/11 victims here, why don't they put that $100 million towards actually helping out the first responders who are suffering?
What about just, you know, and I'll throw it out to both of you guys. Our country was built on tolerance of religion. The entire reason the Pilgrims came over here was freedom of religion. Isn't there a separation of church and state in this?
Well, I would just say on the Bill of Rights issue, the reason that the Bill of Rights exists is because it's there to defend our liberties when it's hard, not when it's easy. When it's easy, we can all agree there doesn't even need to exist. We all understand the right.
Carrie,
but when it's
about
hard, you've got to stick up for it. And when it's, particularly when it's unpopular, that's why you've got freedom of religion.
Carrie, I'll give you the last word here.
You have to remember there are hundreds of mosques all over New York City, thousands of mosques all over the United States. This isn't about keeping someone's First Amendment rights away from them. This is more about transparency and finding out who exactly is behind this mosque and who is funding it. And we need to get some answers before we can actually start building it.
All right. Well, one thing is clear here. Both Democrats and Republicans seem to agree. President Obama stirred things up even more by wading into this in the middle of the midterm election season. That is for sure. Faiz Shakir, Carrie Pickett, thank you both for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Our coverage of the mosque controversy continues tomorrow on Fox 5 Morning News. We'll have more